All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. I want to introduce you to Mr. Matt Giberson. Matt, welcome to Conduit News Radio. How are you this morning?
I'm all right, Paul. I'm just sucking down some caffeine trying to cope with reality, but I'll get there. Joe really liked that. Yeah, that's what we're trying to do, too. We're trying to cope with reality as well.
Matt, tell us about Free TV. What is Free TV, and what made you want to start this project?
Sure. So Free TV is going to be like a satirical, political social media channel focused on the Libertarian Party in Arkansas, and just trying to give them some credibility that the local news media doesn't seem to be doing. It was just kind of birthed out of me being tired of being just angry about politics. I want to actually do something about it, and so I just took some time and
because I've been up here
thought about my talents, my skill sets, and prayed about it, and I really feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Awesome. So tell us about your talents. Let's just show some of your talents. This is your first episode. It's up on the YouTube channel. Again, Free TV. Go ahead and show this, Joe, and we'll get Matt's response.
Because I've been up here in the legislature.
Wearing that Patriots of Act 746 hat. Yep, and then you get the logo, and then of course the interview starts. All right, so Matt, tell us a little bit about does everybody that interviews with you that's a libertarian get to go out and shoot guns like that?
Oh, I mean, it doesn't. See, the thing is, it doesn't just have to be libertarians. I'm hoping to get everybody on there because
okay.
I want Free TV to be a voice of the people. But I myself am a libertarian, and I feel like, as a libertarian, we have an obligation to be willing to at least hear good arguments from good local politicians. It doesn't mean we have to vote for them, but yes, the prerequisite to being on the show will be to go to the gun range with them.
Okay, good. Well, I think that's kind of a good
It'll
test.
Filter out the chaff from the wheat. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so did you train for this? I mean, what's some of your background?
Well, I'm a Bible college graduate. Well, I'm a high school dropout who went to Bible college and graduated. And, after doing ministry for a few years, I won an essay contest with Dove Men Plus Care, chosen out of 20,000 applicants to win $5,000 to be my own boss and start my own business. So I had already started working on a business project with a guy, so that just kind of put the accelerator on. And we opened Mugshots Express, the coffee shop in Hot Springs, Arkansas, back in 2014. I sold it to my business partner the next year, and it's taken off and done great. They've just opened their second location in Malvern, and I stepped away from a few years. It was a wild ride, that experience, and chose to pretty much just live under a rock. I got rid of my television, I got rid of my smartphone, and just chose to focus on my family. And after about 3 years of stepping aside, I just felt like it was time to step back into business, and I've chosen media and marketing and politics to do it. This business project is in conjunction with another business that I've just started called Mind Gap Media, and it's a social media marketing agency for local businesses.
Wow, man, that does sound like a wild ride. And so we're looking right now, for those of you watching the program over at Conduit News or Facebook.com/Conduit News or YouTube, we're playing episode 1 in the background of this interview with Mr. Whitfield Hyman, who was on the program yesterday. But so you have some other episodes coming though, right? You've got other interviews lined up.
Oh yeah, I've already got an interview with Mark West done. Him and I are scheduling a time to go shoot. I've got, Tom Canada, Joe Swafford, Frank Gilbert, Michael Kalagius. Oh, man. I mean, I've too many people. I've talked to Drew. Well, no, I haven't talked to Drew Tanner yet.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for being with us today. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. We are building a liberty machine here. If you want to contribute to the program this morning, as always, you can give us a phone call or a text message. The number 870-275-9799. Or over at facebook.com/Conduit News. Very excited about today's program. We got some interesting national developments we're going to get to here in a moment. I want to talk a little bit more about this, kind of hypocrisy when it comes to the outrage. I mean, we made a really interesting point that I really think is kind of I think it's seriously being considered by some, because if you're going to be outraged over Russia or outraged over this German gas pipeline deal and the whole NATO point, then we need to seriously look at whether or not, we really do have an economic war going on with China. We do have military concerns going on with China. And then, so why is Arkansas's chief economic philosophy trying to make Chinese companies wealthy? And that's not just me saying this, because right after I made the point that I made last week, you had the head of the FBI, Christopher Wray, come out and say that China is a big threat. Of course, everybody was going crazy about Russia last week, and the Helsinki summit. Well, now there's more people that have come out talking about China, so I'll have that story for you. Also, in the state news, we have some outlets out there putting the pieces together when it comes to the new indictment of, or not indictment, but the guilty plea of Jerry Walsh, Southern Arkansas Youth Services. We talked about this all day on Friday during the Friday broadcast. That is now mentioned another senator, Senator C. So we have Senator A in one guilty plea, Senator A and Senator B, and now we have a Senator C that's accused of taking a lot of money or being paid a lot of money for no legal services, but for influence. Basically, influence peddling. Influence peddling is a serious concern. So we'll have that for you. Also, at the bottom of the next hour, 7:33, we'll be talking to Aaliyah Shapiro. Aaliyah Shapiro is a senior fellow in constitutional studies for the Cato Institute. He is the editor-in-chief of Cato Supreme Court Review. For example, his Twitter handle, you can go look it up. He tweets law, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Again, Aaliyah Shapiro. Really excited to have him. We're going to talk about the Supreme Court and the recent nomination of Mr. Brett Kavanaugh. And again, that's coming up at 7:33. Let's get to some breaking news, though, nationally. Probably the biggest thing that happened over the, the last couple of hours is that you have President Donald Trump calling out he's basically calling out Iran with tough talk. Now, as soon as I read this, I started thinking, this is very reminiscent of what President Trump did with Kim Jong-un, which led to the North Korea meeting. Trump essentially in a tweet warns Iran's Rouhani to stop the threats or suffer historic consequences. Yeah, isn't it? Listen to what he said here. Fox News reporting President Trump late Sunday tweeted out to Iranian President Rouhani to never threaten the U.S. again or face historic consequences. The tweet came on the heels of Rouhani's warning to Trump that hostile policies could lead to the mother of all wars with Iran. Trump called Rouhani to stop the rhetoric, or in caps, you've got a CNBC article. Well, that's fine. That's fine. We've got two different articles. It's no big deal. Suffer the consequences, the like of which few throughout history have ever suffered before, the president tweeted. So stop what you're doing or suffer the consequences. Quote, we are no longer a country that will stand for your demented words of violence and death. Be cautious. That is pretty interesting stuff. Of course, I'm sure we'll hear from the mainstream media again about how is President Trump going to bring us to war again? Remember, that's what they said with the North Korean stuff. I guess it's they don't want war unless it's war with Russia, and then it's all hands on deck. Also, I want to also go over this story. So we have this story here, the Wall Street Journal. The Justice Department releases a heavily redacted, basically a FISA memo. Carter Page surveillance documents set off new skirmish. The release of heavily redacted warrants to monitor the former Trump advisor reignite partisan battle. I was following this story this weekend, and I thought to myself, okay, we essentially have evidence here. If you look at these things, and they are heavily redacted, so you have to use your imagination with some of this stuff. But it appears that under the Obama administration, President Trump was, he says he was spied on. That's what he says. It appears that they certainly misled the FISA court with these documents, because you apply to spy on Carter Page using evidence, quote, evidence that was paid for essentially by the Democrats and Hillary Clinton. And now this is coming out more and more. And so I'm thinking to myself, okay, surely this whole Russia thing is now going to start to unravel, and we're going to start to maybe look and see at some of these illegal things or allegedly illegal things that the Obama administration was doing. And of course not. I mean, I don't even know why I get my hopes up anymore, but you have to forgive me. I guess I'm just naive in this sense. I mean, if you just do a Google search of Carter Page, it's now. And I was listening to the mainstream media on the way in on the radio this morning, and they took this huge story that essentially suggests that the Obama administration, was abusing the FISA process. We all know, but that they were intentionally misleading a court. And what do you hear? Well, Carter Page denied that he was a Russian agent on CNN on Sunday. What? That's the story? It's like there's literally, I don't know what would have to happen for there to be some sort of like a resolution or some sort of moment of clarity where the press actually starts to report the truth. I honestly, I don't know. There's an intentional effort to mislead you. It's it's the carefully crafted language of the press. Let's take something that blows up everything we've been telling our audience. Let's report on the new development, but let's do it as in such a way that we carefully craft the narrative to where now we're just, we're walking this tightrope, and we want to continue to mislead and control, and that's what the media is right now. I mean, it's really, it does turn my stomach a little bit. And you just can't believe the bias. It is absolutely everywhere. It is everywhere. Now, I'm a conservative, you know that, so. I mean, I'm being honest with you about my worldview, right? I don't try to cloak myself and say I'm objective. I'm objective, and no, we now I want the facts, and we do, but I have a conservative worldview. I want to measurably reduce the size and scope of government. The telephone number today, 870-275-9799. On a different note, last night, Joe, I was thinking to myself, I haven't told you any of this, Joe, that we almost weren't going to have a show this morning. I was in a considerable amount of pain last night because I was making some, what I will call Tuscan-flavored it was like a Tuscan pork chop thing. Used some herbes de Provence with some olive oil, and I seared them in butter, and then put them in a 400-degree oven. And here's the problem, right? This is where things get a little dicey. So I put the pan in the 400-degree oven. I go to take the pan out, and I use a pot holder like a normal, intelligent person would do. And I put the pot on the stove, and I neglected to put one of the little covers on there. I always do it. I think I probably burned myself probably 5 years ago. And so this burn that I'm clearly, with the context clues, you know where this is going. And so then I start cleaning up the kitchen, and I'm going from, one side of the kitchen to the other, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm going towards the sink, And so I'm walking towards the sink, and I'll just say, hey, I'll just grab this pot, put it in the sink, start to clean things up. And I grab that pot. It's been in a 400-degree oven, and I have this, and normally you would just let go, right? But I got all of this grease in the pot, and so I held on for a split second longer than I should have, because I was thinking I didn't want to drop, I think maybe I can make it. Nope, didn't make it. I dropped the pot, and grease went flying everywhere into the cabinets. It looked like somebody shot and murdered the Tin Man. In my there's just all this this grease and everything everywhere. And anyway, then I told my wife, I said I had an accident, and so I spent the hours leading up to bed. It actually doesn't look that bad, but I thought it was going to be really, really bad. We put some medicine on it, and I seem to be fine today. But anyway, the show almost didn't happen, at least in my mind. I was like, I don't think I can go through with it. Anyway, hey, we're going to take a break. We're going to reset. We got a great show coming up for you. We're also going to hit this Conduit for Action article at some point during the day. Is the state Senate serious about openness? Excellent commentary, stuff to think about. They're actually trying to think about putting cameras and actually record and do the things that the House has been doing for a while. We'll talk about that as well. The phone number, 870-275-9799. You can sound off at facebook.com/Conduit News. Back in a moment.
I've talked to several people who are already in lined up to do this with me. I'm filled up till at least November.
Mm-hmm. Well, so tell me about libertarians. Now, you say you'll talk to anybody because you're not afraid of ideas, and I think that's really powerful stuff. But I mean, what about? Are you yourself a libertarian? I guess.
I'm a new libertarian. I have not really chosen a political party ever, and so I've realized that at a certain point I'd have to get behind something, and I feel like while most of the average citizen may claim a political party, they're probably a libertarian and don't even realize it.
In Arkansas, every single hour there is a politician not getting what they want. For some, it's an absolute nightmare. The sleepless nights wondering if progress will ever come. Lying awake pondering how to grow government in this political climate. Asking questions like, why don't my constituents want to pay a few cents more in taxes? Everyday politicians feel abused and neglected. These politicians are starving for power. They're hungry, confused, and they don't understand why no one seems to care. Will you be a patriot and commit today to help these poor, starved for power public officials? It's simple. All you have to do is commit to stay silent and never dissent or stand in the way of your politicians' rise to power. Never speak up or get engaged to stop the growth of government. By committing to these simple steps, you will ensure the life of your politician will be filled with contentment and the respect they are desperately seeking, as well as campaign contributions from lobbyists.
This message brought to you by Aristocrats Serving Arkansas.
PHP Parody.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, welcome back. Good morning. Thank you so much for being with us. Tim, writing on the Facebook page, says this. This is an excellent point, by the way. President Trump met with the president of China, who props up North Korea, then called out North Korea. And we see the results there. Now, I know everything's not done with the, whole Korean peninsula, but I mean, it was certainly progress. Now, President Trump meets with President Putin, who props up Iran. Most people know this, that Russia and Iran have a somewhat friendly relationship. And then he calls out Iran. President Trump is now calling out Iran, saying, you better watch yourself, essentially. And Tim on Facebook says, is this a pattern? Or I see a pattern, and I too see a pattern. What in the world? Let's kind of play that out. That's very interesting to me, Tim, that you would say that. That's very interesting to me. You meet with China, you're propping up North Korea, but now China helps us take care of the North Korea situation, or at least begin a process to try to take care of the North Korea situation. Now President Trump meets with Putin, and maybe this is an attempt to try to deal with Iran in some way. If that is true, can you imagine? If that is true, can you imagine what a huge success the presidency of Donald Trump? I mean, putting another feather in your cap. That doesn't even begin to describe what would. But what would the media would go crazy? I mean, can you imagine if Saudi Arabia recognizes Israel's right to exist, which has happened? The Korean Peninsula being on the way. I know the Washington Post has a bogus story about how, in private, Donald Trump is frustrated with lack of progress on North Korea. We're to the point now where they're actively deceiving you. They make up sources, but you've got progress being made there. Can you imagine if something actually happens with Iran and there is a way to deal with them, non-militarily? I'm telling you, folks, it could be huge. I mean, we may be possibly witnessing, some of the biggest geopolitical shifts and changes in modern American history. So anyway, just be watching for that. I like that thought, though, Tim. That is a very, very interesting thought about the pattern that you're seeing, and I think I see it too as well. But we won't get in. The press is the press. So, hey, kind of looking at the week. If we look at the week and the schedule that we have for you throughout the week, just in case you're planning and you want to hear some of these interviews, tomorrow on the program at 7:33, we'll be talking with State Representative Kim Hammer about his Senate race. Excited about that. Also on Wednesday, we'll have our Patriots of Act 746 segment. Mr. Chuck Clifton will be on the program. Then on that same Wednesday, we'll be talking to another Cato Institute scholar. We're talking to one today, Elias Shapiro, about the Supreme Court. But on Wednesday, we'll be talking with Mr. Trevor Burrus, who's a Cato Institute scholar. I want to talk about these new rules that have come out governing, quote, dark money. Get ready for that. That's going to be That's going to be interesting. Then we'll have a small business spotlight the following day. And then on Friday, and I'm excited about this, on Friday we're going to be hearing from Mr. David Ferguson, the former head of the Bureau of Legislative Research for the state of Arkansas. You know, we're gonna talk to Dave. You know what we're going to talk to David about? His article, the one about the guns, the one about the Attorney General's opinion. You know the one I'm talking about, the one that essentially takes the Attorney General's opinion to task, kind of takes some of her, conclusions, or maybe plays out some of her interpretation of the law when it comes to is there a penalty in the code for carrying a gun without a permit or a permission slip from the government. And we're going to have him on to talk a little bit more about that, because if you haven't read it yet, it's up at conduitforaction.org, and you need to check it out. Mr. David Ferguson does an excellent job. And he has some good questions about how, well, if this is your interpretation, then you wouldn't be able to carry a gun in your own home. That to me was the best. That to me was the most powerful argument he made, because it just really it just kind of exposes how people are reaching here, and they're trying to. Well, I mean, think about it. It's like we want the perception. You know, it may be a reality that you can carry a gun in the state of Arkansas and there's no penalty for it. And, you know, you don't have to check in with mother government. They don't have to sell you your right back with a permission slip. That may be the reality, but for some reason, it is the reality. But the perception, though, we have the people, our overlords, they want to continue a perception that, oh, the law needs to be clarified. That's the perception, needs to be clarified. Or the perception of is, no, you still do need these licenses. You still do need these permits. You still do need to keep propping up the Arkansas State Police budget. You know, that seems to be what's going on. Perception versus reality. Perception versus reality is such a powerful concept. You gotta understand that, especially if you're talking about politicians, because most of the time it seems the perception they're trying to advance is not actually what's going on. That's not actually what is occurring. Anyway, let me just give a shout out here to Stephanie. Stephanie, listening on Facebook, she says good morning. Good morning to you, Stephanie. Let's see here. What else do we have? Expecting clarity from the left, be it the Democrat Party or the mainstream media, is ludicrous. I would agree with that. I do also have some news. You know, the state Republican Party met this weekend. They were going over the platform. Now, over at Conduit for Action, they talked about how they did put the principles back into the platform. Phrases like limited government are now back in the state Republican Party platform. Now, this is, of course, after the fact, somebody noticed they were missing. Conduit for Action noticed they were missing. And so those, things like, referencing God and referencing limited government are now back on the platform. That article's up there right now. So they did that. But they also, I believe, they adopted a rule essentially saying, because, see, State Representative Mickey Gates hasn't resigned yet. Everybody's trying to get Mickey Gates to resign. They're urging him to resign. They're saying, because of not paying his taxes, which is absolutely, it's like, why? And apparently this was going on before he ran for office, which I'm just like, why did you run for office if you haven't paid your taxes? Am I the only, if you haven't filed with this, do you not think that's going to come out? But they passed a rule saying that they'll certify him, but they won't endorse him. Meaning they'll certify the Republican candidate Mickey Gates for re-election, but they won't endorse him, which is interesting. That's never been done before. At the same time, though, I mean, there's been some calls for Senator Jeremy Hutchinson to resign, but not from Governor Asa Hutchinson, not like he's done with Mickey Gates. Back in a moment.
And the only reason they don't realize it is because the media hasn't given them an opportunity to realize it. Because if enough people wake up to the power of the third party, they're going to jump ship. And so this project is all about just giving people I'm giving libertarians a product that they can share with everybody else that they know that will get them to at least avail themselves to libertarian ideas.
And I think that's really, really healthy. I'm reading some of the comments on Facebook. Amy writes, pick me, pick me. We have people that want to be interviewed, I think, just because. What kind of gun is that? What kind of gun in that video that we just saw?
Oh,
was he
man,
shooting?
I think that's a G36. I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure. Those were not my firearms. I have an AR-15, but it is nothing like what we were firing. But we've talked to the folks down at Thor Global Defense Group, and they've been willing to work with us. We pay the range fee, and they give us it's BYOB, bring your own bullets, but they'll give us the full autos to shoot, and whenever we schedule this. But I'll tell you what, for people that are wanting to be on the show, the number one thing that they can do that will help me, because this is meant to be a voice for the people, is you can search me on any social media platform, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, with the tag @FreeLibertyTV. Or you can email me at freelibertytv@gmail.com and send me a correspondence clip. Honestly, I want people to start sending me 1 to 2 minute clips of their stories, things going on in their area, and if it's funny, if I like it, I'm going to air it on my episode.
It's at Free Liberty TV. We're updating the graphic here on the website. We want to make sure. So that's your Twitter, and that's also is that Instagram and other outlets too? You said.
Yeah, pretty much any of them. You can just type at Free Liberty TV. I managed to stumble across that name. It hasn't been taken in any of them. So
good.
I have a website, freelibertytv.com, but there's nothing up there yet. I've just been so busy with all the other business aspects.
Well, I really hope the YouTube channel takes off for you, Matt. I really do. If I can keep you just a little bit longer, I would love to know. You said you're a new libertarian. I would love to know.
Yeah.
You also said that you went to Bible college. You also said I'm curious. Were you always politically minded? When you were in the ministry, or was it secondary?
Yeah.
Was it the same? What has there been a journey there at all?
Yeah, there has. So my mom spent 16 years in Navy intelligence. So
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Joe, your lack of concern over my burned hand is disappointing. What is it Vader says? I find your disturbing. Is disturbing. I find your lack of compassion disturbing. Just so you know, if you're just joining us, I grabbed a pot out of the oven and I burned my hand pretty bad, but it's better. You know what I did? Just so you know, this was my remedy. I'm going to share my remedy just real quick. It was just I stuck my hand in a bag of flour for about 5 minutes, and because people say that's what you're supposed to do, and then I put some lavender on it, and then after that I went for the lidocaine laced aloe vera, and then I just held my hand in front of a fan for like 2 hours, and then I went to sleep.
Technically, I haven't even seen your burnt hand.
Yeah,
you showed it to me.
Yeah. See,
here's the thing. I don't see anything.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks.
Well, no,
right. Mm-hmm.
I feel bad for you, but
Well, it looked a lot worse than it did last night than it does now. So I think I'm okay. I think I'm good.
I would imagine so.
But I find your lack of compassion disturbing.
Again, I feel bad for you, but it would be the first time someone's burned.
You didn't ask me about it during the break. I told you about this burn. What do you think? This is just for the show? Like I just made it up?
Of course.
Yeah.
It's for the entertainment of the people.
The phone number is 870-275-9799. Yeah, taking pleasure in my pain. I'm telling you, with Pain Point Politics, I should be able to get some sort of check out of this. welfare check or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, so we have to talk about this. We have to talk about the point that was made on this program a couple of times last week. We played for you the clip of President Donald Trump last week at the NATO summit from 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago now, where he said, listen, you want us to protect you from Russia, but you have Germany that is making Russia rich, 72%. Now they're reliant on the natural gas pipeline. I mean, it was great to point that out. It was fantastic to point something like that out. Well, then we also played for you 2 weeks ago. We interviewed Congressman Rick Crawford, and we were talking specifically about the tariffs and the trade war, and his comments were really insightful about the trade war that's been going on with China, not Russia, but China for a very, very long time. And he even mentioned, I think he mentioned the military, or I mentioned the military. I can't remember at this point, but that's beside the point, because what we did was we made the we tried to using Donald Trump's logic, we tried to ask the question, is it a good idea for our economic development strategy of picking winners and losers, which I disagree with the government picking winners and losers by giving taxpayer money to companies to try to recruit them here. I disagree with that. I hope the process ends tomorrow, okay? There's studies that say it's useless and it doesn't work. I disagree with it. But the point is, if we're going to continue with this, should we be doing business with Chinese companies in the state of Arkansas? Is it not hypocritical if we're in a trade war with China, and if we are in a military conflict in terms of kind of like a Cold War in a way with China? Should we be doing business? Should Asa Hutchinson's chief economic strategy involve him giving away Arkansas taxpayer dollars to Chinese companies so that they can come here, promising to create jobs at some point in the future, but using our resources to do it to make Chinese communist companies rich back home? Is that consistent with Donald Trump's Make America Great Again strategy, number one? And number two, is it not also hypocritical to say that we're in a trade war with them, they are our adversaries, if you will, but we're also going to be doing the type of business that we're doing? Not that you don't do any trade with them, but that and Donald Trump made the point over in NATO that, energy is different. So this is not the same thing necessarily as energy, but it is still worth, I think, a debate. Do we really want to go down this path? Now, right after that point was made last week, the head of the FBI, Christopher Wray, came out and said, everybody's talking about Russia, but China is the threat. And there's been some new developments on that. It's not just FBI, but now we have the CIA now sounding the alarm about this rise of China and that they are a legitimate threat. And I made the point last week that if we're going to get all upset about Russia invading the Crimea, what about the South China Sea and the artificial islands they're building? Well, this particular article that was posted the other day over at Zero Hedge makes the same point that I made last week. Listen to this headline. FBI, CIA sound alarm over China Cold War, warn most significant threat facing U.S. They quote a Michael Collins, some CIA guy, saying that at the end of the day, the Chinese fundamentally seek to replace the United States as the leading power in the world. Okay, and this is the cornerstone of Asa Hutchinson's economic philosophy, doing business with Chinese companies. That's a fact. My question is that good? I would like an explanation. Wouldn't you at least like an explanation saying, well, we're going to continue doing business with Chinese? Yes, I know it's they're our biggest threat. I know the FBI and the CIA. I mean, we were Asa was more than happy to come out and critique Donald Trump's performance at Helsinki, like other Republicans, knee-jerk reaction, because Donald Trump didn't want to play the little narrative that the media wanted him to. They wanted him bow down, kiss our ring, tell us that we're right, and Donald Trump didn't play. And, of course, the Republicans, like they did all throughout the campaign of President Donald Trump, their knee-jerk reaction is they've got to get out. They've got it. They can't help but tap dance to the narrative that the media's laid. And I'm not saying that everybody that said something critical is a bad person, but I'm just saying this is everybody's tendency is going to want to try to save face based on the goalposts that the media lays out. You can play between here and here. But you can't play outside, and Donald Trump, his entire political career says, no, I'm going to play I'm going to set the goalposts, and that's driving the media crazy. It's absolutely driving them crazy. I think it's a legitimate question. There should be some explanation. I mean, if we're going to be critical, if you're a Republican and you're going to be critical of Donald Trump's performance in Helsinki, because of because we need somebody to stand up to Russia. Why are we doing business with Chinese? Why is that? Why is if we're going to pick winners and losers, we're going to give our taxpayer monies away to private companies, which again I disagree with that whole idea. But if you're going to do that, why do it with Chinese companies? When we now have the CIA and the FBI. Listen to this. Forget the Russian hysteria. According to Michael Collins, the CIA's Deputy Assistant Director for the East Asia Mission Center, it is China that is waging a quiet Cold War against the United States, using all its resources to try to replace America as the leading power in the world. Beijing doesn't want to go to war, he said at a speech in Colorado. But the current communist government under President Xi Jinping is subtly working on multiple fronts to undermine the United States in ways that are different than the much publicized activities being employed by a far weaker Russia and which the media is obsessed with. Collins also warned that rising U.S.-China tension goes beyond the trade dispute, playing out in a tariff tit-for-tat between the two nations. Among the numerous concerns over China, their subtle efforts to steal influence, he cited pervasive efforts, to steal business secrets and details about high-tech research being conducted in the United States. Meanwhile, the Chinese military is expanding and being modernized, even as the U.S., as well as other nations, have complained about China's construction of military outposts on islands in the South China Sea, which Collins said he would argue that it's the Crimea of the East. That's exactly, I didn't say Crimea of the East last week, but I definitely made that comparison. Collins' comments track warnings about China's rising influence issued by others who spoke earlier this week at the security conference. The alarm bells come at a time when Washington needs China's help in ending its nuclear standoff with North Korea. And, of course, okay, that's the CIA. Earlier in the week, you have the FBI. Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI, also underscored the U.S. concerns about China. He said represents the broadest and most significant threat America faces. During an interview with NBC's Lester Holt at the Aspen Ideas Forum again in Colorado, Wray said that the FBI has economic espionage investigations in all 50 states that track back to Chinese activity. Let me say that again. Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI, said that the FBI has economic espionage investigations in all 50 states that trace back to Chinese activity. Now, I guess it's possible that the governor is helping the FBI. I don't know. Maybe it's some sort of sting operation, recruit these Chinese companies in. But that's very far-fetched, right? Something tells me that that's not the case. My question, again, would be, I would love for somebody to say, is is Arkansas giving money to Chinese communist companies? Is that helping the FBI? Is that putting more work on the FBI's plate when it comes to trying to, secure domestically our technology that's proprietary? And these are it's an honest question. Obviously, I disagree with your economic philosophy, Governor. Like, I don't think we should be giving out this money, and the government should be taking in existing Arkansas businesses' tax dollars and giving it to any company so that then they can hire his employees away at a higher wage because they're subsidized. I disagree with that. I think that's the government actively working against its own citizen. But if you're going to do it, maybe use American companies. Keep it kind of in-house. Why do the China thing? I know you've gone over there. The governor's gone to China several times, and then he'll put out the press release, and the governor's available for a video press. So then he'll do press conferences, and beaming back home to Arkansas, and this is what we're accomplishing when we're over here in China in the Shandong province. Honest question, though. I mean, if everybody's going to be hysterical about Russia, you would think we would at least have the same fervor of defense. We need to stand up for China. And if it's hypocritical for Russia or for Germany to make Russia rich in a gas deal when NATO, in the context of NATO, we're trying to protect, and yet we have this trade deal going on. We have a kind of a Cold War going on, an unspoken Cold War with the Chinese. My question is, honest question, does that make any sense? Why would we be doing business with these people? Honest question. I know it's not energy, but is it? Listen, the governor has said, according to some of the trade representatives he spoke to in D.C., that work for the president, that his economic plans with these Chinese companies do not. He has said, been quoted in the paper, that it does not. That it is consistent with the MAGA agenda. That it doesn't contradict the MAGA agenda, Make America Great Again. I 100% believe that the governor hopes that is the case. And, why wouldn't you want to make sure that one of the things, the governor has spent a lot of time recruiting Chinese businesses with Arkansas taxpayer dollars. And so for that, if that were to be in conflict to the MAGA agenda, that'd be pretty big, devastating blow to a lot of the work that he has done trying to decide who to give Arkansas taxpayer dollars to, which company's going to get it. So to me, and I the president might come out tomorrow and say that we want all the Chinese companies in the world to come to America. We want the Chinese companies to keep coming to Arkansas. He may come out and say that tomorrow. I don't know. But if I were, it's just speculative, I would imagine that the president probably would rather Arkansas spend its taxpayer dollars somewhere else. I mean, can you imagine if we were giving our taxpayer dollars away to Russian companies? Oh, right, that's what the Clintons do. or the Clintons are the ones that take our uranium and they give it to the Russians. That's what the Clintons do. My bad. But can you imagine if we were, if Asa was making trips to Moscow to try to recruit the next big hit in Arkansas? I think people would have a big deal. They'd have a big problem with it. But according to the FBI and the CIA, China's a bigger threat than Russia is right now. But we're lining up. Did you see Tucker Carlson on Fox News? Tucker Carlson also made this point about China. And he mentioned the fact that China is essentially paying, through lobbying efforts most of the people in Washington, D.C. right now. I'm sure the FBI is investigating that as well. Let me know what you think. Sound off in the comments on the Facebook page. It's facebook.com/Conduit News, or send us a text or a phone call, 870-275-9799. Coming up on the program, I want to talk more about Jerry Walsh and him pleading guilty last Friday with his defunct nonprofit Arkansas Youth Services that were trying to help delinquent kids. In the meantime, he was paying off at least one senator for not legal work. He was an attorney, but for influence peddling. And that's mentioned in this guilty plea. We'll talk about that, as well as the Arkansas Times actually has a really great piece where they are putting the pieces together with Michael Lamoureux, John Goodson, DBH Consulting, Bruce Hawkins. We'll talk about that coming up at 7. And then at 7:30, Aaliyah Shapiro, senior fellow in constitutional studies from the Cato Institute, will be on the program. We'll be here on Conduit News. We're going to take a break. Back in just a moment.
Buy, sell, and trade at Triple R Pawn in Ash Flat. Firearms, computers, sporting goods, musical instruments, tools, jewelry, and everything else you can think of. It's all at Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat. Gun enthusiasts, log on now to TripleRPawn.com and browse their amazing inventory. That's TripleRPawn.com. You can also call them at 870-994-PAWN. That's 870-994-7296. Let the great team at Triple R Pawn help you find what you're looking for. That's Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat, TripleRPawn.com, or call 870-994-PAWN.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Ruined. And ever since high school, watching the news with her was always a trip, because she would know, she knew how to look at things, past the spin.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of how I was raised. And then, all through Bible college, I went to it was a King James independent fundamental Baptist. I mean, it was as close to military as Bible college could be. And so it was a very conservative thing, and a place, and that coupled with my upbringing with my mom made it really hard for me to embrace the whole patriotic Christianity, like assuming that America is like God's gift to the world and that we can act however we want because of it.
God's kingdom. God's kingdom is God's kingdom, and America's America. They're not the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. But embracing the idea that America is God's kingdom, even though it's not.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
870-275-9799. Real quick, listen, I don't mean to continue to harp on this, but you have to understand something. The process by which Arkansas picks winners and losers and, gives away your taxpayer dollars to companies, that process is done through something called the Arkansas Economic Development Commission. The head of the Arkansas Economic Development Commission is a guy by the name of Mike Preston. And at the last press conference that he did, I think he made a huge blunder. They were welcoming and announcing this deal with Rui, a company from the Shandong province that's going to, at some point create jobs here in Arkansas, right? And this is what he said. Go ahead and play this. This is what Mike Preston said at the press conference with the Chinese delegation there in the room.
Chairman Chu, Rui, welcome to Arkansas. And then, Chairman, you'll look out in the audience and you'll see multiple members of the governor's cabinet. We're also here to support you. You'll see multiple members of the state legislative assembly. They're here to support you, and specifically Senator Caldwell, Senator Ingram, Representative Murdoch, Representative Hollowell. These are your senators and your representatives now. You call on them, and they're going to help you. Guarantee it. And Senator English, I saw you out there too. Thank you for being here as well.
So it's interesting choice of words there. These are your senators and your representatives. No, you're a Chinese citizen. You're not an American citizen, and you're not an Arkansan. I think those comments, in light of what the FBI and the CIA is now saying about how China is our biggest threat and we're doing business with China, again, maybe there's some explanation. Maybe there's some reason we could say, you know what, there's an exception. This is why these deals need to continue, these economic. And now, again, full disclosure, I completely disagree with Asa Hutchinson and others' economic philosophy of giving away taxpayer dollars, okay? I disagree with that. I think some of you out there do too. But if you're going to do it, why do it with the Chinese? Why do it with the Chinese? Honest question. I think it needs to be addressed in some way, in some capacity. It's very interesting. I see we have Senator Linda Collins Smith on our Facebook page. She has a question. If we cannot vote, if illegals are here, okay, so like illegals are not supposed to be able to vote. If we are supposed to tax other nations as they come into this country, shouldn't Arkansas tax dollars only go to Americans? And if we're giving away, or if we do matching federal tax dollars, do we break any tax or foreign laws if we give dollars to foreign governments? Are we funneling dollars to foreign countries? That's a good question. Yes. That's the answer. I mean, you're talking about essentially, come on in here, China. Yeah, you'll create jobs, maybe, but we know that the studies say that doesn't even happen. They're just playing a game of, they're basically just trading baseball cards because you've got skilled employees that are going to leave somewhere else, and you're not going to have some guy that's on a couch that goes to work, more than likely. You have people that are already at work that are going to go work for the subsidized company and make a little bit extra money for themselves. That's what's going on here. But hey, come on in here, China, and we'll let you have our resources, use our resources, make your goods, and then sell it back to us for the promise of jobs at some point in the future. And again, I mean, if you can be lured somewhere, you can be lured away. That's another thing. Anyway, we've got one more hour coming your way next. Thanks so much for listening. Yeah, Randy on Facebook says, your senators? Yeah, that's the mentality. It was a huge mistake, a huge blunder to claim that a Chinese chairman of a company here in Arkansas, these are your senators. No, these are my senators because I live in Arkansas.
The news
and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Yeah, so I know that I don't know how to explain it. Basically, that just opened me up to the realization that, you know, the world is a really big place, and yeah, America is a great country, and so because of that, we have responsibilities that come with the freedoms and things like that we enjoy. You know, freedom. The American dream is that freedom is possible, not that it would be easy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
and
really
so
cool.
that's the things that have led me to be a libertarian.
Wow. Yeah, I can. I certainly I identify. That's fantastic. So, we're talking with Matt Giberson. It's at Free Liberty TV. Look him up and go to the YouTube channel. Check out these episodes. One more question, Matt, if you don't mind. What do you think is maybe some of your biggest issues, so some of the biggest problems, or some of the biggest things that you would like to see fixed? When it comes to the status quo now versus, where you would maybe want to see the state of Arkansas go, or the national government go. What are some of your biggest issues out there?
Sure. I just feel like we have in the media several different voices telling us all the same things, just a different way. And the problem is we're not hearing different voices. We're not hearing different issues. Especially, the libertarians don't do the best job at presenting themselves, and I feel like that's what turns off a lot of people. So if we can reinvent our identity and make being libertarian sexy, we can attract people to our ideas. The ideas are what are going to get people to stay, because those are the things that made America. Those are the things that made America great. Our ideals of working hard, being independent, self-accountability, things like that. The ideas and the ideals that founded America are the things that the Libertarian Party still holds to. And even though our policies may not always flesh out in a way that the media can make look pretty, I think those ideas are going to be what create legislation that brings about the change that we all want. And so we just have to give that a platform.
Yeah, that is extremely interesting, Matt, and I really appreciate, and I'm really glad that you are stepping up and trying to make a difference and trying to get your message out. I think that's encouraging. I think it's encouraging for our listeners to hear. How old are you, Matt?
I will be 31 in 15 days.
Well, then we're just going to go ahead and chalk this up as a young conservative. Well, real quick, libertarian, young libertarian.
I'm not. Hold on. No, I'm like the most liberal conservative ever.
Well, so yeah, that's what I'm saying is. So we have these young conservative segments. So when you say you're like the most liberal conservative, what does that mean? What would that mean to you? Because see, that word conservatism is used in so many different ways. One of my biggest problems is, we can't agree on the definitions of words and phrases, and so the word conservative might get used to amass political power, when in reality, what the constituents think is conservative policy is not at all what the politician thinks is conservative policy. So they use these words to try to gain power. So tell us, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. I mean, politically, I would consider myself very liberal, even though spiritually I'm conservative. I mean, I'll use gay marriages as a good example. I will go toe to toe with any Christian in regards to the lifestyle of homosexuality, but I don't. When it came to gay marriage, I'll put it. I said it this way: if they want to lump themselves into the 50% divorce rate that exists with heterosexual couples, go ahead and let them. If they want to just file their taxes and then end up getting divorced, and have to deal with all the litigation that the conservative religious Christian group in America, which also has the same divorce rate as spouses, then let them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't think you can't legislate morality, and if as Christians, we believe that. If we believe that we're supposed to love people, if we believe that only Jesus can change the heart, why do we want to create legislation? Why don't we actually take on ourselves the responsibility of being the church and loving those people instead. And, I mean, it's statism to, like, expect the state to handle that whenever
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Joe is in the process of uploading the first hour of the podcast. It is uploaded and done, so you can get that. Subscribe to the podcast. You can do that at iTunes or SoundCloud, or it's up at conduitnews.com. So the first hour is already up, and we entitled it Picking Winners and Losers, Russia-China edition. It is clear, so go check it out. The last thing I'll say about it is, in the context of picking winners and losers, we've decided that Russia's the loser and China's the winner because we'll do business with the Chinese and we'll recruit those businesses in Arkansas, and everything's fine, nothing to see here. The telephone number, 870-275-9799 if you want to contribute. We're up at facebook.com/Conduit News. Folks, I've been saying for weeks, when I reference the state of Arkansas and the corruption that's been going on, I say that corruption's in the headlines on almost a daily basis, and it seems like at least once a week we have reference to that corruption. Max Brantley, a couple of days ago, over at the Arkansas Times blog, they have a little bit of a follow-up, and in case you missed it, on Michael Lamoureux, Asa Hutchinson's former chief of staff and the former president pro temp of the Arkansas Senate, Michael Lamoureux, apparently has been mentioned in a plea as Senator C, a plea by Jerry Walsh, who was the leader, the executive director of the South Arkansas Youth Services down in Magnolia. $380,000 in total kickbacks to a lobbyist, a relative of the lobbyist, and an unnamed senator to ensure good treatment in the legislature, Brantley writes. So, again, this involved Milton Rusty Russell Cranford, who's also pled guilty and mentioned that he gave $500,000 to Senator Jeremy Hutchinson as a bribe. At least that's what's alleged in the federal court documents. Now we have other documents. We have Arkansas documents from the U.S. Attorney out of Arkansas, the Western District. Dak Keese is his name. And in this plea with Jerry Walsh, they're essentially saying, now, there's so much speculation that we could do here. But I'm curious, because we do know in an interview Jerry Walsh said, before he pled guilty, he said that he hired Michael Lamoureux to do, quote, legal work. Of course, the plea now says there was no legal work done. This was all for special treatment. And we also know, in an interview the Arkansas Times did, that Jerry Walsh also said that Jeremy Hutchinson was hired by Arkansas Youth Services. And so the question on everybody's mind was, when the news broke on Thursday afternoon that there was another guilty plea, most people assumed that Senator C was Jeremy Hutchinson. Most people assumed it. I mean, and they said, Jeremy's mentioned again. Well, but you started to read the plea, and you realize, no, I don't think Jeremy was able to control. I don't think Jeremy Hutchinson was able to control what bills came to the floor. Not the way that a Michael Lamoureux would be able to. And considering the scheme ended sometime in 2016, that's when Michael Lamoureux left the governor's office after we found out he made $120,000 from a nonprofit that paid him that, a lobbyist-funded nonprofit. They raised $140,000 that year, and they gave $120 of it to Michael Lamoureux. So he resigned when that happened as governor's chief of staff. And so there's a lot of but I guess a lot of people are wondering, well, why didn't Jeremy Hutchinson, why wasn't he mentioned in this deal if he contracted with Arkansas Youth Services, South Arkansas Youth Services? Why, so it may be a situation where maybe they have more evidence with Senator C. Maybe they're withholding some stuff. Maybe they got more evidence with Michael Lamoureux in this particular case, but they have more evidence with the Rusty Cranford. Of course, the Rusty Cranford plea that mentioned Jeremy Hutchinson was out of Missouri, not out of Arkansas. So there's a lot to take in here. Listen, I got a text message from a friend who asked if there was any way in explaining the situation of Arkansas corruption. You've got, at least 4 or 5, 6 former legislators or current legislators that have been ensnared in this whole thing, that there needs to be a flow chart made. There needs to be a flow chart with links. And you know what? We're on that. We're going to get that done. This is you're exactly right. It's a great idea that a listener had, and this is something that must happen, as far as I'm concerned, to explain the web that has been created here from Arkansas corruption. And a visual aid is needed because it's going to help people be able to connect the dots. It will literally connect the dots for you. So we're going to get that get started on that and get that out to you as soon as we can. But the interesting thing here in this Arkansas Times piece is that they kind of start to put a little bit of those pieces together that I haven't heard anybody else say. Now, Benjamin Hardy, they do reference the interview here where Jeremy Hutchinson and Michael Lamoureux, both lawyers for legitimate legal work, that's what Jerry Walsh claimed. Okay, but they have Michael Lamoureux's statement here. Michael Lamoureux responded to this guilty plea where it is apparent that he is mentioned as Senator C. Quote, "I am just learning about this. I have not any communication with law enforcement about this development. Neither legal fees nor campaign contributions have ever influenced my behavior as a public official. Once I have a clear understanding of the situation, I will comment further." Stop. Let me just say this. We need to interject this. The people of Arkansas need to demand indictments. The people of Arkansas need to demand indictments. Or they, convene a grand jury. I mean, come on. The people of Arkansas need justice. I would encourage in the strongest way I could these prosecutors from these U.S. attorneys. Please, the people of Arkansas need your help. We need confidence. We have to have confidence in our government. From John Woods to Jake Files to Mike O'Neill to Hank Wilkins to Eddie Cooper to Rusty Cranford, and then you throw in Randall Shelton. You throw in all. We've got something's got to give. Michael Lamoureux, Jeremy Hutchinson. If this stuff was going on, we need to know about it, and the people need confidence. It's not about somebody going to jail as much as it's when somebody does do something The people, we need to have confidence that they're going to be caught. The politicians need to have confidence that they're going to get caught, that this has got to end. This loophole about being able to pass bills for your clients as an attorney, if you're a legislator, as long as the contract says lobbying services are prohibited, is ridiculous. If anybody else did this, and you were not you were not an attorney and you couldn't launder the money through your law office, you'd be in jail, right? If you were if you were a real estate agent and you were a legislator and you were being paid extra through your real estate company to pass bills for whoever, for South Arkansas Youth Services, it would be clear you can't do that. You can't make extra money for passing bills. Can we all agree? Can we all agree that it is wrong if you are a senator or a state representative and you are a legislator that you don't make extra money, you don't get paid specifically to do things for special interests? You don't get to enrich yourself personally. The special interest, they can give you all the campaign contributions they want. Obviously, there are, limits to that. But you know what I mean? You can do that, but you're not going to be able to make an extra $120,000 on the side. You're not going to be able to make an extra $380,000. You're not going to be able to make an extra $500,000. I mean, I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were saying, Paul, I was listening to you. I'm out here working. I'm out here trying to feed my family, and I hear that there's some state senator that got $500,000, and it makes me sick that there's people out there making that kind of money, carving out a financial interest, as a public official. I mean, we have to have confidence restored. It is lost. There's not enough ethics rules in the world that are going to fix the loss of confidence that people have right now in Arkansas state government. Right? There's not enough. We have to have actual justice here, and other politicians need to be put on notice. If you do this, you will be caught. We can only hope. So please, U.S. attorneys, come on. This has been going on for a long, long, long time. I know we went from the Obama administration to the Trump administration, and there are new appointments for U.S. attorneys. I get it, but come on, guys. Come on. I mean, was there a guy was there a former legislator running around wearing a wire for the FBI? Was that the case? Everybody thought that was the case. What are in the contents of those conversations? If that was in fact the case, the FBI has been investigating this for a long time. Max Brantley writes that he asked Michael Lamoureux a couple of follow-up questions, trying to make clear whether he agreed with or disputed Jerry Walsh's statement in his guilty plea that he hired Lamoureux for legal work. Specifically, though, we have to point out, folks, that the plea that states that Jerry Walsh hired Lamoureux not for legal work. That's the kicker. There was no expectation he did any legal work. The expectation was he would protect government contracts going to South Arkansas Youth Services. By the way, an organization trying to help kids or juvenile delinquents. There's somebody getting rich after this. I mean, it's just always follow the money. Hutchinson acknowledged being paid for legal work, but insists it was all legitimate payment for legitimate work. I wonder if he's told that to investigators. The government doesn't discuss future developments, but reports persist that prosecutors are sitting on sealed charges in the case. They have given no indication it has reached an end. Max Brantley reporting that the government doesn't discuss future developments, but reports persist that prosecutors are sitting on sealed charges in the case. Now, if what Max Brantley is saying is correct, that the government is sitting on sealed charges, Well, then that would mean that we already have grand jury activity going on in the state of Arkansas. It says here, now here are the pieces that they're putting together. Max Brantley writes, Lamoureux left the Senate to become Governor Asa Hutchinson's chief of staff. He departed that job to become a lobbyist. Through April of 2018, according to OpenSecrets.org, he reported $40,000 in income from federal lobbying work for DCI Group, Pafford EMS, Reynolds American, Rural Arkansas Telecom, and SAS Institute. He was employed for those clients by Washington Advocacy Group headed by John Goodson. That would be the husband of Courtney Goodson, Supreme Court Justice. The Texarkana lawyer, U of A trustee. Update, Lamoureux was also listed as a registered lobbyist on the 2018 filing by DBH Management Consultants of Morrilton, the firm headed by former legislator Bruce Hawkins. He's been listed as a lobbyist on reports filed through April. Now, who is Bruce Hawkins? Bruce Hawkins is the guy that gave Jake Files $30,000. Not to be confused with David Norsworthy, who gave Jake Files $80,000. You see why we need a flow chart? Anybody out there figuring this out? It's hard to follow. We got to make a flow chart. This is Conduit News Radio. Back in a moment.
Where I
all responsibility to Christian.
Well,
if we don't agree with them.
I've heard that point of view before, and I understand your skepticism there. I mean, my whole thing with the gay marriage thing was with the ruling and everything else. I mean, there is no constitutional right for marriage. If anything, it exposed the fact that the government. I mean, I don't care if the government tells me I can get married or not. I don't need them to validate my lifestyle. I took vows before God, before my family and friends, and my wife, and it's a religious ceremony. And so now,
exactly,
yeah. And so to me, and this is kind of, I think, a significant difference, because government has been in charge of marrying or certifying marriage for a while, or you have the tax code that's now intertwined. I mean, it's all one big mess. But if you actually go back to first principles,
this is Mother Government. My people, the promised revenue gathering to fund my motherly goals, such as the Arkansas Works, Obamacare, private option has commenced. I have asked my representatives and senators to execute my will concerning new revenues, from the tires you use to drive on my roads, the candy and sodas you consume and purchase in my stores, and the digital products you download on my internet. Your sacrifices and tributes, which are owed, display a measure of obedience, but there are still collectible sacrifices I require from the people to increase the work and size of our great government of Arkansas. There are two matters left unresolved. 1. I require a general tribute for all purchases made on my internet. Not just digital products, but all products. My dear children, there are those who would thwart my motherly goals of progress. If you see them, please combat their misguided notions of freedom by using phrases like mom and pop, and tax cheat. 2. I still require more revenue sacrifices concerning your consumption of my gasoline. I require your undying loyalty on the subject. Subjects, in conclusion. More revenue is good. Static revenue is bad. This message was brought to you by your stewards, aristocrats serving Arkansas. Thank you, my children, in advance for your required and expected obedience that keeps society safe and prosperous. And always remember, from cradle to grave.
PHP Parody. Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Last week, when was this? No, when was the 15th? Was the 15th what? Was that was last week, right? Yeah, that was last week. So Roby Brock over at Talk Business and Politics has this story. It fell through the cracks. I had it scheduled for Friday. Anytime I get a chance to report on something that Randy Zook says, I want to make sure that I do that for you. Randy Zook is the head of the State Chamber of Commerce. He says that he's trusting President Donald Trump and his tariff effort for now, hopes Chinese investments in Arkansas remain. This is extremely interesting considering the hour that we talked, what we just talked about. Quote, at this point, we're sticking with Trump on faith because there's no question that trade practices are out of whack. There's no question that the United States gets rookie dude on every corner in trade relationships. Boy, I wish we had the audio of this. Can you scroll down so people can see this actual quote? Randy Zook says, there's no question the United States gets rookie dude on every corner in trade relationships. Our products get to pay high tariffs going into other markets. Our intellectual property is stolen at will by Chinese manufacturers. I mean, we are just the world's piñata in terms of trade practices, Zook said. So he says all that, but then he wants the Chinese companies to still come here. Now, that doesn't make any sense, especially when the FBI and CIA are now saying that China is our number one threat and that we are in a Cold War, and yet, can you imagine if we were recruiting Russian businesses the way we're recruiting Chinese businesses? People would probably have a different mindset with that. Quote, there's some real pain coming initially from the ag sector. Our soybean farmers have seen about a 20% drop in soybean prices in just the last 30 days, so that's pretty painful when you're in a tight margin business already. Some of the tariffs and prohibitions of products that exist in some of the international markets were where we would have more success or more access to markets, rather, with less tariffs or taxes imposed on our products. That would be ideal. It's very complex. He goes on to say, at the end of the day, the fact is any Chinese company is an agent or an arm of the Chinese government, and trade policy is played out one company, one business, one plant, one deal at a time, and so keep our fingers crossed, Zook said. At this point, there's no indication that any of those deals are going to do anything but move ahead, but let's be aware and make sure we do everything we can to protect them. So this is so weird that Randy Zook is essentially saying the potential economic benefits outweigh the possibility that these are agents of the Chinese, and the FBI says they have investigations in all 50 states when it comes to the economic activity of the Chinese in our country. Why would we be giving our money to the Chinese to make them rich when they are our adversary? I think Randy Zook and I think these questions need to be answered by the governor. They really do, in light of what's been going on here. Now, what does Randy Zook think about schools and education? Well, listen to this audio clip that we always, anytime Randy Zook comes on, or anytime Randy Zook comes up in the headlines, I feel the need for you to listen to this.
Because I've been up here in the legislature when folks were rattling around and screaming bloody murder, and I can't help my kid with their homework. Well, they shouldn't be helping their kid with the homework in the first place. You know, that's a teacher's job. That's my opinion. Well, they shouldn't be helping their kid with the homework in the first place. You know, that's.
Yeah, that's Randy Zook. That was when they were. Remember when that was when the governor was trying to diffuse the outrage over Common Core, and he had a little task force. Yeah, apparently parents shouldn't be helping their kids with their homework in the first place. So basically, we know the standards are garbage. We know it's very complicated. But it's the teacher's job. Don't worry about it, parents. Just give way. You know that. Just relax and allow your kids to be institutionalized. They're in our hands now. We got them for 13 years of their life, and then we'll need to put them in a work training program after that because we didn't get the job done for the first 13 years. We got to take a break. Back in a minute. you're just like, well, why do we even need the government's approval here? They're not really a party that needs to be involved at all with a religious ceremony. And that kind of bleeds over, Matt, into the concept of trying to force a artist, a florist, or a cake baker to participate in what they believe to be a religious ceremony that goes against their religious beliefs. And so it certainly is a very confusing situations, and there's a lot of people out there that, if you want your lifestyle verified by the government, it's very easy to claim victim in a lot of these situations.
Absolutely, and that's why I'm all for it, is because, like you said, the government really shouldn't have their hand in a sacred vow. And this is why I'm so fed up with the government, is because really it boils down to just the money. The only reason that gay couples wanted to get married, I say the only, I can't speak for them. So I'm assuming one of the major reasons was for tax purposes, was for, being able to write somebody into your will, or, a power of attorney, that kind of a thing. That's what and so it was all crutched around sadism.
I would agree with that. The problem that we haven't really, you always talk about the slippery slope. People on the right, they talk, well, this is a slippery slope. I think history is borne out that they're correct. We're going to get to a position now. With the LGBTQ community, and now it's not just I like members of the opposite sex. Now it's like we have to. We're denying biological realities, and there's now a movement to try to go through the American code, the law, and now we have to change. We can't have reference to mom or dad or he or her, and they want to replace all of this with these neutral words, and it's like, well, should we accommodate that? At some point, when do we say, enough's enough? At some point, you got to feel if they keep going the direction they're going, somebody's just going to, there's always going to be somebody else who feels like they're not included or they're not treated fairly. So if that's the case, maybe we've missed something somewhere.
Yeah, I think, we've already given over too much control for it to not come to a point where we're going to have to try and take some back. But, in regards to the slippery slope, I would, and yes, you're right. It is a slippery slope, but this is where my 6 years of studying Scripture comes through. If you actually know the Bible, and you actually know how the story ends, you realize that it's going to get bad no matter what. And
the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Good morning to you. Thank you so much for being with us, starting the beginning of your week with us here at the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Hey, welcome to the program for the first time. We have Mr. Ilya Shapiro on the phone. He's a senior fellow in constitutional studies with the Cato Institute, editor-in-chief of Cato Supreme Court Review. Mr. Shapiro, thanks for coming on the program this morning.
My pleasure. Good to be on, Paul.
Yes, sir. So I wanted to just have you on and talk a little bit about the Supreme Court nomination. That is, your specialty. We've got Mr. Brett Kavanaugh. What were your thoughts? What's your reaction to this nomination to the Supreme Court by President Trump?
Well, Judge Kavanaugh is very well regarded. His opinions have been cited around the country and by the Supreme Court. Very well known in legal circles, and a solid conservative. It's interesting how far we've come. That not everyone he wasn't necessarily everybody's first choice, but if people are thinking that he is, not more moderate than some than others that they might have preferred, that's a big deal, because 20 years ago he would have been seen as on the more conservative side, and now he's kind of very much in the mainstream. But he's known very much for his opinions about government structure, separation of powers, and pushing back on the administrative state, the regulatory agencies. So I think he'll fit in nicely on this court.
You following the Supreme Court the way you do, did you expect this resignation from Justice Kennedy? I think a lot of people were kind of shocked by this, or especially on the left. I was, jumping up and down when I heard the news. But what were your thoughts, or what are you hearing?
Well, he's 81, so at that point, nothing's really necessarily a surprise. I think every year people were expecting more and more that it was becoming more likely. Apparently his wife wanted him to retire sooner so that they could enjoy more time together while he's still in good health. So not necessarily a surprise. He's been on the court more than 30 years. He's been a judge 42 years. So I was saying this year it's probably more likely than not, but sure, there wasn't any leaks. We didn't know ahead of time until the news broke that June 27th, just over 2 weeks ago.
Do you expect? Well, let me say the Democrats are saying they're going to, try to pull out all the stops. They're going to try to obstruct as much as they can. But can they really? What can they do? Are we going to get a vote on this? Before the November elections?
Yeah, there are no stops to pull. There's no more filibuster. I think the Democrats made a huge strategic error in filibustering Neil Gorsuch last year, and therefore forcing the Republicans to get rid of the filibuster for Supreme Court nominees. So all they can do is make a media firestorm, and that's already happening. All sorts of different types of criticism of Judge Kavanaugh, which isn't really directed at him. It's just the idea that Donald Trump gets to appoint another Supreme Court nominee and gets to replace the so-called swing vote Kennedy with someone more conservative. I think that the focus is going to be on the millions of pages of documents from Kavanaugh's service in the Bush White House and on for Ken Starr when he was investigating President Clinton. The battle now is among the lawyers and the record keepers in the relevant departments to try to figure out what kind of documents are going to be released, what needs to be redacted, when is that going to come out, and probably the focus of the hearings when they happen is going to be on that rather than his judicial rulings, which are very interesting and all that, but it's not there's not red meat there about gay marriage or abortion or these types of issues. So I think barring something really unknown, to use Donald Rumsfeld's terminology, we'll have a confirmation vote certainly before the election, but I would say even before the Supreme Court starts its new term in the first week of October.
It's really interesting information. We're talking with Eli Shapiro. He is a senior fellow at the Cato Institute. He follows the Supreme Court, and there's an article I'm looking at right now that he's written, and it's really, really strong. Can you tell us a little bit about maybe what happens next? If they're having such a conniption over the idea of Donald Trump getting to appoint 2 Supreme Court justices, can we imagine what would happen if he gets to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices? I read a meme the other day, Ilya, that said one of Abraham Lincoln's biggest regrets was appointing Ruth Bader Ginsburg to the Supreme Court.
Yeah. Well, she's 85, and her fitness regime and her nutrition is getting a lot of attention. I think her trainer has written a best-selling book of taking advantage of that. And there's a new documentary out. Look, she's been called frail. I think since she was a teenager and she survived cancer. God bless her. But if assuming that the Republicans keep the Senate this fall, that's really the whole ball game. It's still probably more likely than not that they will. And she's going to try to outlive the Trump administration. But yeah, you're right. If she goes, whether willingly or not, that replacement, and almost certainly Trump would pick a woman to replace her, but still, it would be an originalist, a textualist woman. Probably Amy Coney Barrett, who was one of the finalists this time around, a young, only been a judge less than a year, but a well-regarded, stellar professor at the University of Notre Dame before that. And if that is indeed what comes out, then the firestorm that we're seeing now, replacing Kennedy, will be dialed up 10 times.
If Brett Kavanaugh is confirmed, some talk about John Roberts now becoming kind of the swing vote now. Would you see that being kind of a realistic possibility? I mean, considering he was the fifth vote there on the Obamacare Supreme Court that upheld it as constitutional.
Right. Well, it's not speculation. I mean, I think that's just empirical fact in terms of the way that different justices vote, and it's not a matter of, since you're replacing Kennedy, you automatically become the swing vote. That's not how it works. Kavanaugh is almost certainly to the right of Roberts. He's an originalist and a textualist. Some question of whether he has certain kind of political characteristics like Roberts, meaning thinking about other issues and positioning and strategy that are not necessarily legal interpretation. But regardless, Roberts will be the middle of the court. I wouldn't call it a swing vote. Other than the Obamacare cases, he hasn't really pulled off surprises. But his tendency is to be a minimalist. That is, not deciding cases as broadly as Scalia did, or Thomas, now Gorsuch, Alito. He's been criticized in concurrences, even if they agree with him in the ultimate result. And I'm not talking about the Obamacare cases, but over the years, we've seen cases where he will write an opinion that lots of justices will join, sometimes even unanimous, but he'll be criticized by other more conservative justices saying, hey, you're splitting the baby, you're rewriting the law, you really have to go whole hog. And he's incrementalist and minimalist in that way. But we haven't had a Chief Justice be in the middle of the court ideologically or jurisprudentially in quite some time. So this truly will be the Roberts court, even as in the last decade we probably called it more the Kennedy court.
Last question, and I really appreciate your time this morning. I have talked to a few people about this whole process and how we do have, the left in the country really upset at the idea of Donald Trump getting to shape the Supreme Court, for generations to come, or for a generation. And some people are saying, the left, what they're really scared of isn't President Donald Trump. They're actually scared of the Constitution being read and interpreted as is, knowing the meanings of these words when they were written in the 18th century. And so do you agree with that, Ilya Shapiro? Are they really just afraid of the document itself and the checks that it places on government authority?
I think that's right. I think it's very much you have to go back to the original progressives. And Woodrow Wilson, over 100 years ago, was talking about how the Constitution is outmoded, it's antiquated, it was written for a different time. And so this is the irony. People feared that Donald Trump would be an authoritarian and take away people's civil liberties and act in all sorts of unchecked ways like a dictator. Well, the courts haven't allowed that, and in fact, his administration, at least his greatest successes where he's actually moved the ball, is a very rather conventional Republican agenda. It's not something weird and Trumpy, if you will. And the same thing with the judges, which I would say is his biggest success of this administration, because he's deferred to actual legal experts and people who are dedicated to this project of advancing originalism and textualism, reading the law for what it is rather than trying to seek some better policy results. I would argue that he should let the Federalist Society run even more of the administration, not just the judges. But regardless, I think that is indeed the fear. Not that he's appointing so-called Trumpy judges, Judge Janine or Judge Judy, or his casino lawyers, Michael Cohen, who knows, any of that sort. I mean, he is appointing people. Ted Cruz would be appointing the same kind of people, the most rock-ribbed constitutionalist conservatives. So, and yes, the left is afraid of this because they think that doesn't give the flexibility that they need to rule for the little guy, or whatever the politically correct way might be in any given case.
I really appreciate your time this morning. Ilya Shapiro, Senior Fellow with the Cato Institute. I'd love to do it again sometime. Thanks for spending time with us today.
My pleasure. Take care. Have a good week.
All righty. Folks, that's Ilya Shapiro. You can find him on Twitter. It is at iShapiro, SHAPIRO. If you want to follow him on Twitter, at iShapiro. And again, Senior Fellow with in Constitutional Studies, Editor-in-Chief of Cato Supreme Court Review. His Twitter handle says, I tweet law, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Check him out. We want to thank him again for coming on. Folks, this is Conduit News. Good morning. Back in just a moment.
Buy, sell, and trade at Triple R Pawn in Ash Flat. Firearms, computers, sporting goods, musical instruments, tools, jewelry, and everything else you can think of. It's all at Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat. Gun enthusiasts, log on now to triplrpawn.com and browse their amazing inventory. That's triplrpawn.com. You can also call them at 870-994-PAWN. That's 870-994-7296. Let the great team at Triple R Pawn help you find what you're looking for. That's Triple R Pawn at the Light in Ash Flat, triplrpawn.com, or call 870-994-PAWN.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com.
This is Representative Dan Sullivan with the Liberty Moment. From the beginning, authors of our Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, and the Federalist Papers advocated the general election of people who possess wisdom, discernment, and loyalty to their constituents. Why? The people expect their representatives to uphold their promises. The representatives recognize the honor bestowed by these constituents. Advancement comes from their followers, not the government. Elections are frequent, and accountability is a compelling factor to loyalty and support from constituents. From a July 5th, 1929 speech by President Calvin Coolidge. This is Representative Dan Sullivan with the Liberty Moment.
Paid for by Sullivan for Arkansas. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
So I think in America, honestly, Paul, in America right now, I think Christians are upset because they're being forced to face the reality of living in Babylon. You know, I mean, we are more like first century Christians now than we were 25 years ago because we don't have it as easy as we used to, you know. Back whenever the church first started, if you espoused Christianity, your family had a funeral in your name and you were cut off from the culture, you know. And here in America, we've enjoyed the liberties to just kind of flaunt lukewarm Christianity, and we're wondering why it didn't yield any results, and we're dealing with, you know, the fruit of what we've sown.
Matt, you're speaking a lot of truth right now, and I certainly appreciate everything you just said there, because that I can't argue with that. I can't argue with that at all.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back. Thanks so much for being with us. Hey, you know, one thing that we didn't get to talk about, so we interviewed Judge Janine Pirro, last week, and it was a great interview about her new book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals. And I had a friend who was reading it and caught a phrase that she mentioned, influence peddling, in her book, and she does, and that's interesting because we got that going on right here in Arkansas, influence peddling, and but we interviewed her 7:33 on right before she went on The View, from what I can tell. And, of course, when she goes on The View, her and Whoopi Goldberg are having a discussion. Very ironic that Judge Janine says, hey, we just got to get to a point where we can talk to one another and have these discussions. And Whoopi Goldberg basically gets up and walks off the set. This is basically exactly what somebody who's a Democrat these days does. They want to burn down Berkeley or shut down your speech because they don't want to sit there and have the conversation. They don't want to try to understand why you believe the way you do. And Judge Janine said you have Trump derangement syndrome, and she ends the interview. And then, of course, after the fact, I mean, you guys have heard the story by now, but she's trying to leave the building, and Whoopi Goldberg is saying, F you and that sort of thing. I just think this is it was fascinating. It's fascinating. I got a text, after we did the interview that morning, I got a text, somebody saying, Judge Janine is now trending on Twitter. And I look it up. I couldn't believe it. And, when I went to search for it on Twitter, Twitter is such, you can tell they are manipulating search results, by the way. And that's my, that's my hypothesis, that they're manipulating search results, because everything that you found was liberals and leftists saying Whoopi Goldberg owns Judge Janine and all this other stuff. That's not what happened at all. I think any reasonable person, if you watch the video, first of all, it's even hard to even understand what the debate is about because they won't let each other talk. And or Whoopi wouldn't. I mean, and so it's like, how, on what substance? And then people just want these mic drop moments, shutting you down. Leftists applauding that a host whose job it is to interview people can't interview people. Think about that for a second. It's your job to. What if I interviewed somebody I disagreed with and I just left because I got frustrated? That would make me bad at my job. Okay? Whoopi Goldberg is not a good TV host because she ended a segment early because she didn't like what somebody else was saying. And it's not like Judge Janine was advocating, something, that you would cut away to. There's nothing profane being said. This was a legitimate political debate. Whoopi Goldberg is bad at her job. That's really the story there. Moving on now to conduitforaction.org. The headline, is the Arkansas Senate serious about openness? As you see it on your screen, the Arkansas Senate is considering providing video streaming of Senate meetings. This is a good thing. They also need to consider recording all of their committee votes, but I digress. This acknowledgement of the need for more openness is long overdue and comes about a decade after the House of Representatives began video in its chamber and most of its committees. A decade. There are always important issues that people want to know more about, but few can go to Little Rock to observe what is going on and see what their senator is doing. Senators should be commended for moving toward openness and better public access. This is a good thing, and I've commended them publicly. Senator Jim Hendren, I said publicly, I'm really glad he's trying to make this step towards pursuing this. Conduit for Action writes, Senator Jim Hendren announced the effort, and he has moved the August 6th meeting of the Tax Reform and Relief Legislative Task Force to room 151, which is a House committee room equipped for live streaming and recording. That's big news. That's another good thing that has happened. Despite the announcement, it's unlikely the public will see the changes until after the 2019 legislative session. The idea has not yet been formally adopted by the Senate, and then there will be studies, decisions on the location of a control booth, who would run it, solicitations of bids, and then the task of installing the equipment. But if the Senate is serious about the effort, steps can be taken immediately. Immediately. Open many committee meetings to video at no cost. There is also a step that can be taken at a low cost to add video for 2 committee rooms shared with the House, and it should be something that can be accomplished before the next legislative session. Here are some no-cost steps if the Senate is serious. Move most interim committee and task force meetings to House committee rooms, which are already equipped for video. Number 2, during the legislative session, hold the meetings of subcommittees of the Joint Budget Committee in House committee rooms that are already wired, ready to go. Until the January session of the legislature, almost all committee meetings can be accommodated in the House's video-equipped rooms. Moving the joint meetings to House committee rooms would not be anything new. Most joint meetings were held in the House committee rooms until the House installed video equipment in the rooms. I didn't know that. Did you? So they quit having the meetings in the House committee rooms to run from the cameras. The rooms accommodated the 20 House members and 8 Senate members. The Legislative Council, Legislative Joint Auditing, and Joint Budget Committee have more members, and it would be hard to accommodate those people in the House rooms. For example, on August 6th, the House and Senate Committees on Public, Health, Welfare, and Labor will meet together in the Big Mac building where there is no video. Looking back on the legislative calendar several years, you can see that these 2 committees used to meet together in Capitol Room 130, which is a House committee room which is now equipped for video. Anyone want to ask the Senate Chair, Senator Cecile Bledsoe, and the House Chair, Representative Jeff Wardlaw, to move the House committee room? Or to move to the House committee room? The Subcommittee of Joint Budget met they meet early in the morning and would in no way conflict with House committee meetings, which normally meet at 10 a.m. If any legislative committee needs to be videoed, it's the Special Language Committee. Lots of mischief goes on in the Special Language Committee. The Special Language Subcommittee is where substantive language gets inserted into budget bills and has included such things as adding a new tax provision in a budget bill. The House originally planned to put video equipment in the 2 committee rooms in the Big Mac building until the Senate objected. If the Senate would withdraw its objection, there is time for the House to complete that project before the 2019 legislative session. The expense and preparation would be relatively low since the House already has the video control room, because they've got the cameras and stuff in additional rooms. So, in conclusion, if the Senate is serious about wanting to be more open, which we should all be thankful that they are, this is real movement, why delay until after the next legislative session when there are already no-cost steps and low-cost steps to start the process? Arkansas Senate, we want to see what you're doing just as much as you claim you want to show us. So we're waiting. I also, while you're at it, why don't you start recording all legislative votes and all committee votes? That's another step. But you know what? One piece at a time, as Johnny Cash says. Folks, that's all the time we have for this Monday. This broadcast is available over at conduitnews.com, facebook.com/conduitnews. But if you're going to do anything, we would really appreciate it if you go over to the YouTube page and click subscribe and click the little bell for notifications. We would appreciate that very much. My name's Paul. We'll see you tomorrow. Arkansas, be safe.